Good evening. And on behalf of the Ladies Study Group in Kolkata, I would like to wish each and every one of you who has joined us today a very warm welcome. We have completed almost a year since we collectively began our fight against COVID 19, and this virus has truly shocked the entire world. In India, too, according to the latest ICMR survey findings, the coronavirus has infected 21.5% of India's population. Our vocabulary as citizens has completely been transformed today. Comorbidity, hydroxychloroquine, antibodies, vaccines, efficacy, AstraZeneca, Covaxin, Moderna, Pfizer, Sputnik 5. So many other such terms are now liberally sprinkled in all our conversations across ages and discussed at great length with anxiety and uncertainty. And of course, the WhatsApp University rules the roost on this information or perhaps misinformation. But the good news is that 2021 has brought us all new hope with the arrival of the vaccines. And we are all looking forward to the immune capital that this should provide us. However, we have several questions on this rollout. Many of us are experiencing what I best describe as vaccine hesitancy. We are reluctant to get ourselves registered to get vaccinated and instead speak about adopting a wait and see approach, where we want to ensure that a number of people get vaccinated before we come forward to register and get our own vaccines. And so we felt it was so relevant at this stage of the ongoing corona crisis to bring you the third in our series on COVID dialogues. As you will recall, we at Ladies Study Group in Kolkata held our first session on COVID at the very outset of the disease to understand it better with a very eminent panel. We then followed that up for you with the second in the series, where we had Dr. Devi Shetty reassure us on how to manage and control COVID 19. And today I'm so happy to introduce my esteemed guest to you, who will explain and deconstruct the vaccines, the medication, and guide us on the way forward. And so, without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce my guest for today. And I would like to begin by inviting Mr. Satish Reddy, Chairman, Dr. Reddy Laboratories, who is joining us on screen from Hyderabad. Can we have Dr. Reddy?
Hello.
Hi, good evening, Satish. Good evening. Thank you so much
Good
for
evening.
doing this for us today.
Sure.
I
Very good
would like
evening.
I would like to add that Mr. Reddy, as chairman of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, has led the organization's transition from a uni-focused manufacturer of active pharmaceutical ingredients to a vertically integrated generics player. He has overseen the international expansion of Dr. Reddy's in Russia, China, and other emerging markets. Mr. Reddy is an active member of major industry associations and government panels, and in these capacities, he has played a key role in shaping major policies impacting the pharma industry, such as drug pricing, patent laws, amendments to drugs, and the Cosmetics Act. He is passionate about enabling access to affordable healthcare and drives Dr. Reddy's corporate social responsibility initiatives in areas of sustainable livelihood, child's rights, education, and agriculture. I would now like to invite Dr. Anandi Johri, who is joining us from New York. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, and I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for this. I know it's a very early start for you, and we are truly grateful for your time today. Dr. Johri is a consultant in the oncology drug development in New York. She is a trained medical oncologist with a broad experience in oncology patient care and in new drug development. She has spent over 18 years in Novartis Oncology in global drug development as program head for several new drugs As Head of Clinical Evaluation for Business Development and Licensing, and as a franchise head in medical affairs, and many other critical roles. I would now like to request Dr. Rupali Basu to join us from Kolkata.
Thanks, Dia. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good evening, Rupali, and thank you for being here for us today. So, Dr. Basu is an expert in the healthcare sector in India and is currently the Director and CEO at Woodlands Multispeciality Hospital Limited in Kolkata. She is a medical graduate from the R.G. Kar Medical College, Kolkata, and is known for her pioneering work in bringing quality systems and accreditation to healthcare in India. Our conversations today are going to be brilliantly steered by my next guest, Ms. Priya Sehgal, who is now joining us from Delhi. Can we have Priya on screen, please?
Hi, Priya. Good to be here.
Hi, Priya. Thank you for doing this for us. Priya is a senior executive editor at the NewsX channel, where she anchors two shows, The Roundtable and Cover Story. And more recently, she has been frequently covering the COVID-19 crisis. She has won the British Council's prestigious Hansard Fellowship Award, which included an internship at the House of Lords and a course at the London School of Economics. She has also authored a book titled The Contenders. So over to you, Priya. The screen is yours, and we are all looking forward to an insightful session on vaccines, medication, and the possible roadmap ahead.
Thank you, Dia, and the ladies study group for hosting what I think is really a conversation of the times, because we are living in a COVID continuous world. The pandemic is very much there around us, even though hopefully the lockdowns are behind us. But having said that, we've been given there is the vaccine is 2021 has ushered in the vaccine, so there is some hope, as Dia also said. So today's show is really going to be about both the vaccinations, the fears, the myths, all the controversies and the hopes surrounding the various vaccines that are available. Especially, we're going to focus on the options in India and also the options outside India. And secondly, also on the show, we're going to be talking about the various treatments. Ever since we began COVID, we first heard of COVID, it was just paracetamol, to now what all is being done in terms of countering the disease, in terms of, what are the treatment options open, and of course, all the myths and fallacies surrounding that also. And all the questions that you want to ask about COVID, but didn't know where to ask, well, this is the panel where you can ask those questions. So I do hope, you have your questions ready. But Satish, I'm going to begin with you. If you can, you're really a man on the ground. So if you can just walk us through the two vaccines that are available through us in India, specifically the Covishield and the Covaxin, and the apprehensions surrounding both, and which, and if you want to put your money where your mouth is, which one would you recommend really?
Sure. So first, I wanted to thank the Ladies Study Group of Calcutta for having invited me. So special thanks to for calling us here. So I think we were just backstage. We were discussing. There's so much of information out there. If you ask me, it's the incredible amount of information. But I think the key thing is, how much of that is credible. So there's especially, like somebody was saying, to the WhatsApp university, there's so much of information, but sometimes there is no source behind it. So that's why there's a lot of these, misgivings, misinformation, a lot of miscommunication that goes on about what vaccines really are. And that I think puts us in somewhat of a dilemma. And it keeps gradually, because we keep forwarding those WhatsApp, it tends to give some kind of hesitancy, because there's so much of information, and if there's a negative news that spreads around, that's something that goes on, and then it leads to this vaccine hesitancy, right? So coming straight to your question, Priya, but in terms of the vaccines available in India, maybe I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain what these vaccines are about, so it might just give a better view about where these stand. If you take the two vaccines approved in India currently at this point of time, there is a Covishield from Serum Institute, which originally was licensed from AstraZeneca, which got it from Oxford. So popularly, it's called the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So that's one vaccine, and there's Bharat Biotech's Covaxin, which is now available. But both are approved. again for restricted emergency use in India at this point of time. And if you see these two vaccines, right? I mean, overall, if you see vaccines, there are 4 different types of vaccines. There's a whole virus vaccine, which they call, which is the Bharat Biotech vaccine, which is Covaxin. Again, I won't go into technical terms of what it means. There is also, what we call, the viral vector vaccines, which is where Covishield comes in from, or the Serum Institute vaccine. Even the other ones that you hear, even Sputnik, for example, which is going to come because we are licensors. Dr. Reddy's has licensed it from Gamaleya Institute in Russia. That's also a viral vector vaccine. Even the Johnson & Johnson, which is being talked about, not in India at this point of time, but especially in the US, it's under review. That's also a viral vector vaccine. So that's another set of vaccines. There are also the nucleic...
Explain viral vector in layman's terms.
Right. So if you see the explanation for more of these, viral vector vaccines, there is a vector, the viral vector, which is a segment of the vaccine, which is then basically the way you see it as, there's a virus which is used, to deliver the coronavirus genes into the cells, and then it provokes the immune response. I'm just making sure that I get the wording right so that I don't miscommunicate. So this is something which is a proven, time-tested vaccine. But then in terms of the adenovector where it's being used, it really depends on that. For example, the Sputnik uses human adenovirus, whereas the Covishield as well as the J&J part of it uses chimpanzee adenovirus vectors, right? So this is how it's done. So that's the viral vector vaccines. The whole virus vector vaccine I talked about is more of an attenuated or an inactivated virus that's being used. Again, a very time-tested one. That's why they keep saying it's safe, especially when used even for elderly people. So that's where broadly the explanation comes in from. So these are the kind of vaccines available in India at this point of time. But again, I just wanted to stress that these have gone through the regulatory process, right? For example, the trials, the various stages of trial, which AstraZeneca had gone through worldwide, in a large number of patients before they actually submitted to regulatory authorities, and then it was approved. In India, there was a phase 2 trials done by Serum Institute. It had just commenced the phase 3 trials at the time. It was midway through the phase 3 trials when it was approved, and using that data, the regulators had and the what they call the Subject Experts Committee, the SEC, had used the data to recommend approval for emergency use, which means that there's a close monitoring that goes on, even as we speak, in terms of the vaccines that are being delivered, to the frontline workers and the healthcare workers at this point of time. Similar situation with Bharat Biotech also in terms of a phase 2 is when the data which they had submitted to the authorities, even now as we speak, they have data of about almost 23,000 people in phase 3, which will then be completely submitted, to the authorities probably early next month, to give the efficacy data part of it. So that's broadly in terms of what's available right now.
And before I move on to the other panelists, one more question. Today's headlines are actually saying that, we've seen South Africa returning 10 lakh vials of Oxford AstraZeneca. That's not sending a lot of vote of confidence down on people using it. What do you explain for that?
Sure. See, one of the variants, that's the issue, right? So there's a lot of good news on the vaccine, that it's working. The efficacy rates are commendable, especially if you see the mRNA vaccines, for example. All these are pretty good news. But then there's also this not so good news. I wouldn't call it bad news as yet, but still the information is coming out. But the variants, the one that you're talking about, the South African variant, I believe there are 4 cases in India at this point of time from the month of January of South Africa, and there's one from Brazil, which has come out. South Africa
returning our vaccines, returning Oxford.
I'm coming to that because this background was important. The South Africa, India had supplied, Serum Institute had in fact supplied vaccines to South Africa, but then because the variant, it's like in the study that was done, they found that since the efficacy was not high, it was somewhere in the 20% range. So that's why they had halted the vaccination of Oxford vaccine, and then they actually suggested that they return the vaccines back to Serum Institute.
Dr. Johari, can you help us with the overview of the, you're joining us from the US. So you have two options there, the Pfizer and the Moderna, which some people say, if given a choice, I would take Pfizer and even instead of the Indian vaccines. Is that a smart analysis to make, or are we just aping the West over here? And how are these two vaccines different from the ones we have in India?
Sure, I'll be happy to speak about the vaccines. Both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are very effective. They are considered about 94-95% effective in preventing COVID, and equally effective in preventing severe COVID and deaths due to COVID. So there are a couple of points to keep in mind when looking at a vaccine. As Satish mentioned just now, prevention of COVID and prevention of severe COVID. Of the two, prevention of severe COVID, prevention of hospitalization, prevention of comorbidities, those are far more important than prevention of a little bit of a cold. We all go through that. So in that sense, almost all vaccines are very effective at preventing severe disease. That's the first thing to keep in mind, that between 70% and 80% and 90% efficacy, the importance is how well is it protecting you against hospitalizations, against severe disease. Second, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very different from the vector vaccines that Satish described. Those vaccines use a common cold virus in which the genes of COVID, the genes that produce the COVID infection, part of the genes, not the entire virus, not the whole infection, but a small part of the genes of the COVID virus are put into a common cold virus and given as a vaccine. What that does is those small genes will produce those small antigens, and they will help the body produce antibodies and prevent you from getting a COVID infection. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines do not have any virus component. They consist of small amounts of what is called an mRNA or a messenger RNA. These are normal messenger RNAs, are normal situations that help the cell produce a protein. So if you look at a virus, I'll go into a little bit of a science, it's not intimidating, just follow along. The coronavirus has something called a spike protein. That's why it's called corona, it's got spikes all over. And these small little spikes go and get stuck to your lung cells, get stuck to your mucous membranes, your cold, your respiratory tract. So the stickiness of the coronavirus ensures its transmissibility. The more sticky it is, the more contagious the virus is. The South Africa variant that you mentioned is a very sticky one. UK variant, extremely sticky, and therefore very transmissible also. Once even one virus goes in, it sticks to the person and gives the infection. So the mRNA is given as a vaccine to make the body produce the protein of this COVID spike protein. And when that protein floats around inside us, we produce antibodies against it. When we produce antibodies against a spike protein, of course, those antibodies protect against a whole virus which comes with its own spike proteins. So the Moderna and Pfizer viruses help the body recreate a part of that virus and protect itself from the virus. They are 95% effective. The Johnson & Johnson virus, the AstraZeneca virus, they're all extremely effective. The problem comes with some of these variants, the UK, the South Africa, the Brazil variant, against which these vaccines are sort of a little up and down. This is the virus's way of escaping the vaccine by making small changes in its stickability, in its transmissibility. And so all these companies are coming up with slight variations in their vaccine to act as a booster. So you take your regular vaccine, and maybe 2 months later or a month later, a booster may come in against the variants to protect us. The key thing is you cannot get any vaccine to be 100% effective, but a combination of initial prime vaccine and a booster can easily protect the majority of the country, whichever country, against COVID and significantly against severe COVID and hospitalization.
This mRNA technique, is it a new one, or is it has it been used in any other vaccine before?
It's a new one. mRNA technique in and of itself is not a new technique. It has been used in producing antibodies. We hear antibodies for COVID. Antibodies have been used extensively in cancer treatment, in treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, in several other autoimmune diseases. So antibody treatment in cancer has had more than 2 decades of sound, solid research and application. The fact that this was used in such a timely and precise manner to produce the mRNA for the spike protein is where talent and intelligence and foresight comes in. And the fact is that it succeeded marvelously is a beautiful ray of hope in this COVID situation. So I think there should be no hesitancy in taking these vaccines because they are sound, they are guided by very sound scientific knowledge, by excellent clinical trials that have enrolled 30,000-40,000 people. Not a few, not here and there, across the world, over several countries. So as Satish said, these are good things. We should be grateful that these vaccines have succeeded so well, so quickly.
Okay. Everybody is on a note of positivity here, which I think is really good considering the times we're in. Dr. Basu, a bit about Calcutta, the situation over there in terms of the vaccines. Where are we? Not just Calcutta, I think you have knowledge of the rest of India also. In terms of when can we expect the health workers to be covered, and when do private citizens, senior citizens expect to get the vaccines?
For the country, we have 2 types of vaccines we have started with. We have started with Oxford AstraZeneca, or Covishield, as Satish was mentioning. And of course, we also mentioned Covaxin, which has also started in some of the states. All the states in our country have started vaccination on on 16th of January, which is today 17th. So it's about a month, old vaccination program. We started with, priority lists like all countries. So our first priority list had the healthcare workers, which means that entire spectrum of the healthcare workers, from doctors to the housekeeping staff or F&B staff and nurses and everybody. So we have completed. Now we have started the second category, which is the frontline workers, which means the defense and police and also the administrators, IS officers and all that. So that is now going on. And then the third list will be 50 years up, not really senior citizens, which is 65 plus, but we are doing 50 years plus and comorbid. That would be our third priority list, which will start in March. So end of this month, we are supposed to close the second list and start the third priority. And the fourth priority, which is everybody else, would happen in May. That's what is the the way we are doing, and I think we are doing all right.
What is the procedure in terms of how do we enroll? Is there a form, or how does one sign up for it?
Okay, yeah, the whole thing, Priya, is digitized. It is through an app called CoWIN. You have actually, if you go to CoWIN app, you can see a registration form, but right now you'll not be able to actually submit, because I think that will happen when the fourth list will start. Right now, because it is a prioritized list and it's happening through the healthcare organizations, the vaccination centers, which are happening in both private sector and hospital sector. So we are, like, say, for the state of West Bengal, there would be about 70 vaccination centers in the city, and then there are about another 500, which is catering to all the vaccinations in the state of 10 crore population. 100 million is the population of West Bengal. So we are giving these vaccinations through that app.
Brings me to my question to Satish. You two things. One, you spoke about Johnson and even your own Sputnik vaccine. When do we expect to see these coming into the market? First question.
Sure, I won't be able to give the specific date, Priya, because as you know, I had a publicly listed company, so it will be price sensitive information if I disclose anything, with the exactness right now. But I'll just tell you what we said publicly, just to answer your question. Sputnik is right now in phase 3 trials at this point of time. And if you remember, recently Lancet published an article of the world of the 26,000 people trial, which they carried out in Russia. which is Gamaleya, and the efficacy was 91.6%, right, for the vaccine. So that data, and also the phase 2 data, which we had already done in India, on 100 people, and the 1500 phase 3 data that we are currently doing right now, all this data will be submitted to the agencies for emergency use approval, right? So we hope it will be there sometime in March. That's what we have publicly said.
March is not too far away. My second question to you, Satish, is that how long does the immunity from the vaccines last? For 6 months, 8 months? It's all very new to us. So is there some kind of study been done to that when the next round of vaccines will start?
Right. So from the current understanding, right, I think if I remember, WHO gave out the statistics which said that it's like on an average it lasts about 5 to 6 months. Right. There are again different. The months which people keep saying, as the data keeps coming in, you'll have more specific things. Otherwise, it can be anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. That's the range that's been given. On average, it's about close to 6 months. For various vaccines. But I would probably leave it to both Rupali and Anandi to talk more about it because they're more competent to answer that.
Okay. No, Anandi, would you like to let me get Anandi in also?
Can I just say a thing in this? On the efficacy, which I missed out on when I was talking. I think the first dose and second dose. After that, it's 2 months. When it will be 1 month second dose, and then another 1 month you'll get the antibodies. And then what the government is saying that you can have the next vaccine after 1 year. So there will be a certificate given from the CoWIN app itself, and we will be also from the vaccination centers preparing a card, which we will be like a credit card, because this will remain with your bag and with your as a vaccine passport. If you have to travel anywhere in the world, you have to carry that. That you have been given the first dose and the second dose, and what batch number and what kind of vaccination. So it is going to be about we were thinking about 6 months, but I think it will be effective for a year. So just wanted to mention that.
That's a good point.
So let me add. Yeah, sure. Let me add one thing. As Satish mentioned, these vaccines have been approved under emergency use. Typically, a vaccine may take close to 2 to 3 years to go through all the trials, to go through all the approval and get approved. Because of this question that you raise, how long does an immunity last? Which means how long do we monitor antibodies? Every 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Given that trials have been done and within weeks we have had the approvals, we don't yet have full information on how long and how effective the immunity will last. But where we can see some evidence of efficacy is from the disease itself. Patients who have had COVID have their immunity lasting for at least 5 to 6 months, and they are recommended to have the vaccine after, say, 5 or 6 months. We assume, it is only an assumption, that these vaccines will have at least a 6-month timeline of protection. Given the availability of boosters, given the variants that are coming and more boosters that are coming, it's possible maybe every 6 months we take a booster, or maybe a year later we take a booster. But this is contingent on full data coming from these 30,000-40,000 people who are being followed up on the trials. Second, exactly as Rupali mentioned, even in the US, whoever gets a vaccine gets a card. But more importantly, there is an app in their phone. Again, registration here is also through the phone and address and all that. And patients or subjects or normal people, whoever get the vaccine, have to register and respond every day. There's a small little questionnaire that is pushed to your phone every day, and they're monitored every day for a week, then once in 2 weeks, once in 3 months, and up to a year. So, short answer, data are emerging on how frequently to take. Long answer I've given.
Okay, another quick question for you, Dr. Johari, is supposing I have had COVID, do I then need to take the vaccine?
You do, and for a number of reasons. If you've had COVID, you've had your infection, you've had your antibodies, you're protected, which is very good. So there is no rush to go running and getting a vaccine. On the other hand, the antibodies produced due to the COVID infection may last for 5 or 6 months, may not last very long. Who knows how long they will last? There aren't many studies yet. Therefore, taking a vaccine a few months later can only protect you and can help you against all these variants. You may have got COVID against one variant. The vaccine may protect you against some other variants. It's like the flu vaccine that, at least in the US, is given every year for a different variant that keeps coming out. And the variant that comes out is sort of studied internationally. The WHO collects material and proposes the kind of variant that may come out all over the world, and then the vaccine is created. So too with the COVID. Infection may be one, the vaccine may be another, yet another vaccine may be another. But here, let me caution, it doesn't have to get 5 vaccines. You don't get extra protection. No. That's creating confusion and messing up your body. So it's better to stick to one vaccine, stick to the schedule. But if everybody takes it, that's another point, that it's not enough if I take it. We are all in this together. Lockdowns, we were together. Isolated, but together in lockdown. And so in vaccination, unless there is an immunity throughout the population, one person's vaccine will not protect them because you can still transmit the virus. You may be protected against infection, but not against transmissibility. And therefore,
even after the vaccine, you can transmit it.
Yes.
You can be a carrier.
You may be a passive carrier, yes. You may transmit it, not to the extent that an infected person transmits by coughing and sneezing, but you could transmit if the other person is without a mask, if you're singing loudly in front of somebody or having a music lesson one-on-one, sitting and doing alap. I mean, I'm taking extreme examples, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. That it is transmissible, and therefore it is in everyone's interest to vaccinate themselves, to protect themselves, and to protect all of us. We are in this together, all of us.
So then, Rupali, what would you say to, I've seen a lot of social media posts which says, oh, I've got my antibodies checked and I've got a high level, so I don't need to take the vaccine. What do you answer to posts like this?
I know we have to do a lot of, I don't know, but there's a lot of confusion going on in people's mind. They're thinking that because I have got COVID, I have antibodies, I don't need to take, as Dia actually started saying. But we have to keep on saying that we have to be vaccinated and we have to have vaccinations done to actually have the antibodies. And that is what we'll have to do. We have done it for many diseases in the past. So we have to surpass this miscommunication, missed thoughts, and have to move into a vaccination era. I think it will happen the moment, there's also talks going on because you are not really been able to register and get your vaccination. They're not available in the market. So maybe it'll change, and in all these talks like what we are doing, and keeping on talking about it, if you have more awareness, I think people will take vaccination. But tell you the fact that even in my hospital, I wanted a date that I will vaccinate all my staff, all my doctors. That has yet not happened. So there are, even for staff, and it is a voluntary process, you can't force people. So there are staff and there are some doctors who have not yet taken. So that's
what
also there.
Concerns? What are the people worried about? What do you hear? What are the concerns?
I really don't know. They say that it may not be effective. They say that it will have an harm to their bodies, things like that. So both ways, it is not effective, it will make harm. So both ways, it's the mindset, I think, and we cannot do this 100%. But I am okay if 90% is done. Otherwise you won't be able to go to the next step. So that's how it is.
Moving on to the second part of our show, which is the treatments part. Dr. Reddy, we've come a long way. Sorry, Mr. Satish, we've come a long way from the first days to now. I think, and which is also why I think maybe our immunity is kicked in, or the levels, our cases are falling, at least in India. Is it because of the treatment? Is it because of our immunity? And second question that I want to ask you is about herd immunity. If you can just explain to us what it means, and where are we on that point?
Sure. Just on the treatments, Priya, the good thing is, as far as India is concerned, okay, let me just talk about the treatments first, and then I'll say it's like what happened in India particularly. So if you look at the treatments, because something was required quickly and, had to go through the approval process, basically the first focus was on repurposing drugs. What that means is there is already a product, for example, hydroxychloroquine, which didn't make it finally, but it's available. It's used to treat malaria. It's used to treat certain other conditions. It's available, in our pharmacies. So basically, you're repurposing the drug against COVID and then doing a trial, right? A short trial, so at least to see the efficacy of that. So similarly, a lot of such trials got started, and India was lucky that especially remdesivir, which showed activity at a very early stage. It's an antiviral. Gilead, which had the license to that, it licensed the 6 or 7 manufacturers in India, to make this drug, right? To make the formulation of this drug, and India being very good at that, and also make it affordable. We were rather lucky that we were able to do it very soon. So that's why we had the emergency approval coming in fairly quickly, and then at least in the choices of treatments which the doctors had, at least remdesivir was there right in the beginning, right? So we're talking about at a very early stage, and then a host of other things came out, right? For the cytokine storm, for example, there was tocilizumab, which was available, and then dexamethasone, which again is a classic example. It's a steroid which is available in the market at a very affordable kind of a thing. There were studies which were done which said that it can be used, right? So India already had that availability. So in the treatment protocols, coming to your specific part of it, in terms of options, there were these treatment options available to doctors that whenever a COVID patient came in, we knew how to deal with it. And the doctors will attest to this, that they were treatment protocols practiced very well. There was a lot of sharing going on with various medical practitioners across the country, and then there was a treatment protocol in terms of what to give at what point of time as part of the treatment was very, very clear. That was one part of it. So the question where you said, it's like, so is it about our natural immunity and all that? There's a lot of studies going on, right? So it's not one particular point. I think there's articles being published. The most WhatsApp forward that's going on is this NPR article, which talks about 3-4 reasons why this could have happened. Immunity, natural immunity from the various things that Indians could have been exposed to in the past is one of them. Heat and humidity was not, because obviously in May we had a peak of the cases. That's not really the case. BCG vaccine was also talked about. It could be, but only studies have to show all these things. So I think as time goes by, you'll get more and more the data out of a lot of research carried out, which actually will say, so what are the reasons why Indians, it's been much lesser, right? So that's one part of it. Ultimately, herd immunity, right? Because in the seroprevalent the seroprevalence studies that have been carried out, I think the numbers are out there that in Delhi and Mumbai, for example, they said almost 50% plus, which means a large section of the population could have been infected already, which could have led to a certain level of herd immunity. But in terms of what is required, it has to go up to almost about 75-80%, before you can say herd immunity is there. And this is something which, want to break the transmission of the virus, it's this vaccination. It really has to step up. Only, I think, just about 9 million people in India are vaccinated. The target was 300 million people by July, August. We are far out from there. The private sector has to get involved. And then once the immunization happens at a much faster pace, it will move the herd immunity closer to the desired levels, what we're looking at. It will take time, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah. Having said that, Dr. Johari, we are also hearing reports of a second wave, whether in Maharashtra and cases rising. And I was reading there was a party in Bangalore. Basically we are seeing cases rising in India. Are we heading towards a second wave? Not just India, but all over. I guess we've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in London.
In the US, we've had an extensive wave starting in November. So from November through now almost, it was 4 times the first wave. It was not easy. US had close to 240,000 cases a day. So we were getting 2 to 3 lakh 2 lakh plus cases every day. Because again of transmissibility of, again, winter here, we are all in closed environments. It's not an open circulation. So even with a mask, you're in a contained environment. We still don't understand the protective immunity that is required in a herd, on why some countries like India, we've done very, very well. But UK, with almost the same level of precautions, had this variant that spread like wildfire. The key we know is when you get immunity, it is important for the majority of the population to get immunity so that even if a variant strikes one person, the 5 people around that person are immune. And that is how the cycle has to break. So I'll give a small example. If we consider a vaccine to be 80% effective, and if 80% of the population takes it, we've achieved an 80 times 80, 65% herd immunity. 80% effective in an 80% population. In order to reach an 85, 90% of the population to be immune, we currently have 50% seroconversion. And again, we do not know if the seroconversion will last 5 months, 6 months, 1 year. We don't know yet. It's still early days. Therefore, the more who get vaccinated, the higher we drive up the herd immunity through either disease or through vaccination.
And what about the long haul impact of COVID? Post COVID, in India, we actually have long haul hospitals are keeping long haul care centers. I'm sure that's happening in the US also. The after effects of COVID. Are you worried about that? There's brain fog. There's even other kind of more lasting damage.
So that's a good question. What happens, and I mentioned that earlier, with effective vaccines, you're preventing the severity of disease. And so hospitalization, severe morbidity, deaths, if these are prevented, surely the population can handle a few coughs, a few days of maybe a post-viral fever. We all have viral fevers lasting 2-3 days. If the vaccine can bring down the level of morbidity, the burden of disease on hospitals, on treatment institutions, on the community would be significantly reduced.
Absolutely.
Rupani, your take on this whole concept of, why are we letting down our guard too soon? As India thinking, oh, we've beaten it. Everybody was praising us. So did we, kind of lose our masks a little earlier, sooner than we needed to?
I suppose so. It is said that it's may not be there. Before answering directly to your question, I think we also need to know that there has been very large number of population have got the subclinical infection. That's what is being told in our country. So if that has happened, and with the vaccination started, and maybe that is the reason why we are showing herd immunity and our disease numbers are going down. It is going down definitely, and whatever we talk about the little numbers coming up in Bombay or Bangalore, it's still very low. West Bengal is 97.54% is the discharge rate. So we have brought down, which was at the peak about 97,000 active cases, has come down to some 13,000 now. So the number is coming down, and the occupancy of the COVID beds is 3% currently. So your beds are all vacant. There are about 9,000 beds in Bengal which are all vacant. So and we are slowly reducing the numbers. So disease numbers have come down, and naturally people are thinking that we can take it lightly because it is not there around us. And but the real fact is that you still have to be protected. You cannot miss out on the social distancing and hand washing and masks in crowds. These are simple things that we have to, those are the good things that COVID has brought out. I think we need to be protected about not only COVID but many other infections in the near, in the days in the future. So we have to continuously keep our guards on, which is where we have to constantly talk and maybe constantly keep talking about it. But you were talking about the post-COVID. I just wanted to add, you asked about the post-COVID centers. Most of the hospitals do have COVID clinics now and post-COVID clinics. So there are specific clinics, specialized clinics where doctors are sitting for some time during the day, where patients who have suffered from COVID are coming in and showing up because there are issues in their lungs and in their bodies. So there are issues happening for especially the people who went through to the ICU admissions, and ICU admissions was not less. It was almost close to 10%. So all that very sick people are needed to be looked after, and we are trying to do that through these post-COVID clinics.
Thank you all, I think, for also explaining a lot of what is happening, giving us hope, but also, keeping the warning, let's not just lose our masks anytime soon. I think what really scared one about the disease was the isolation part, to not just to be ill alone, you've seen loved ones die alone. I think that was the scariest part of this pandemic, that, which is, I think we're going to be dealing with a whole lot of mental issues soon. I think that should be the topic soon also after this. But now I'm going to invite Dia back in again. I think she's got a whole lot of questions for all of you also. So let's see what our audience has to ask. So thank you, Dia. Welcome back.
Thank you. That's been so interesting. And I really feel that the people who develop these vaccines, deserve a Nobel Prize, because typically these vaccines we have seen historically take 4 to 6 years. And it's incredible how they've made it available for all of us within a year. So I feel that's really something very, very commendable. So we should definitely have trust in the system. So Dr. Johri, I want to first ask you, what I've done is I've collated all the questions together that were on the comment section. And so there are lots of questions about people for the vaccine, those who have allergies like penicillin and codeine, can they take it?
So it's not a simple answer. It depends on the extent of allergies. Some of these vaccines do cause allergic reactions, both immediately and sometimes after the booster also. That is the reason, as Rupali mentioned, after the vaccine, you're observed for about half an hour for immediate allergic reactions. So if you've had a significant allergic reaction in the past, especially if it has led to breathing difficulty, if it has led to hives and rashes all over the body, if you've ever had to have an adrenaline shot to revive you for any kind of a prior allergy, it's best not to take it.
Okay.
The reason is there are so many vaccines coming out. We will surely have a vaccine that has a reduced allergic potential. All the vaccine manufacturers, Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, they're all working on the second level of vaccine, which may require less refrigeration, more ease of transport, less allergic components, less excipients, etc. So if you've had a severe allergic reaction, go slow, wait it out.
Okay.
I'd like to emphasize the value of a mask, a good tight-fitting mask, hand washing and social distancing can prevent COVID up to 80%.
Okay.
Almost as good as a moderate vaccine. So stick to that. There is no place for complacency there.
And to add to that same question, there were 2 more points: people with asthma, diabetes, and on blood thinners. These are the,
Diabetes, there's no contraindication. They can easily take. Blood thinners, there is no contraindications. You can be careful and take it. Asthma depends on the extent of asthma and how often you go into an asthma crisis. You have a bronchospasm and bronchial crisis. If you're a stable asthmatic on an occasional inhaler, on an occasional tablet, go ahead, take it.
Okay, that's useful. So
But
Satish,
again, speak with your doctor. Rupali and her doctor to take care.
No, it's Dia, just to add on, but when we are giving our vaccinations in our vaccination centers, we are just saying that if you, the last part of what Anandi was saying, that if you have taken had to take adrenaline for very, very high level of allergic reaction, only that, and then of course pregnant mothers and lactating mothers and below 18 years. These are the contraindications for the vaccine. Rest, everybody can take it. So
okay.
that's what is being told to us in our protocols.
So Satish, I wanted to ask you, that we have 2 vaccines in India at the moment. We have the Covishield and the Covaxin, and both, of course, are intramuscular. So people have been asking, if they've had one of one, can they have the second dose of the other, or is that not a good idea at all?
That's not
inadvisable, right?
No, it's not advisable. I think Anandi also clarified that when she was speaking about it.
Correct. Yeah.
To stick to one, and stick to the same thing, and even boosters stick to that and not change. No, not change.
Correct. And one more question, Satish, we had was, the testing process where we have this nasal swab which goes almost into our brains. And I believe now there is a better swab which goes halfway through. So are we going to get kits in India where maybe we can do it at home ourselves, or we still need to use the same kind of swabs?
I think there's still time because, even in the US, I think Anandi can say more on that. Testing part of it, if only more money was put into that, and also you had more at-home tests in the beginning, things could have been much more controlled, right? So if I recollect, it was Abbott Laboratories which was working on this just $5 product, which I think is, if I remember the last news item, it was lying unused in a lot of places, so it still has quite some time before it comes to India. Because here the standard is still the PCR test for a confirmatory part, which again is at a low cost, so which is the good news, right? It's only about 500 rupees. So I think it's a technique which has to be somewhat more easier. That's what it is.
Dr. Jory, in the US, are they moving towards home testing or not really?
Yes, we are.
You are,
So,
right?
PCR is still a standard, and that swab that goes to your brain, that used to be there last year. But we've moved to a simple saliva test that is mailed home, and we take it from home and put it in the mail, and the results come in 2 days. Till then, you isolate yourself in the house and not wander around trying to get a test. So the saliva test, it's not the most accurate, unlike a PCR, but then it is safer and quicker. And so the saliva test is moving ahead, and there'll be other home tests that are going to be distributed more widely. But there are many other nasal swab and the blood test that are going on. But I totally agree. The course of the pandemic would have been very different had testing been prioritized much more on a much larger scale.
True.
But then who knew such a pandemic would overpower everything?
So Priya, we've been talking about, the WhatsApp University, and all of us keep talking about the information or the misinformation. I want to ask you, how important is the role of the media in establishing the truth on these vaccines? Sessions like today are so useful. So what are you doing as part of the media?
I think media, the pandemic has seen the media's finest hour, I would say. We've actually, we've entered lockdown in terms of, we stopped covering politics, we stopped doing politics, we actually got in the stakeholders, we saw lots of doctors, lots of healthcare workers, even in terms of businessmen, how they are coping with the, effect to their jobs. So we saw a lot of professionals and the actual stakeholders coming on TV themselves and talking to us about what all the problems are and trying to dispel any myths also. We had the faces themselves coming and talking. So I think media played a very positive role. If I always say we entered lockdown on a positive note and we exited it on a very negative note, the Sushant Singh Rajput drama, I think we exited it with all that, media at its lowest. But during lockdown, during the beginning of the pandemic, I think media did play a very good role, I would say.
I agree.
I hope everybody agrees.
So Satish, do you think vaccines are going to... Yes, we do. Absolutely. Satish, do you think vaccines are going to become mandatory for all of us to travel anywhere in the world in the days ahead?
So I think it will be part of the travel protocol for sure, right? So in what form it will come out, and how it will be enforced, and which country will enforce it in which way is something we have to look for. But clearly, this whole thing about the vaccine passport, that concept is being worked on by several countries at this point of time.
Okay.
So Bali spoke about that card also.
A year.
The
card.
It is that right now, if you look at it, if you want to travel to certain countries, you have to do your RT-PCR and have to say that you are not COVID. And then if you are going to travel without and then even then you'll have to go and stay in a hotel for 14 days of quarantine and all that. So the vaccine passport will be very much part of the reality, because it will then help you saying that you are you are protected, you have antibodies, and you are not spreading it to spreading to that country. Because if you remember, the first thing happened on travel. The COVID was brought out from one country to the other. So the travel focus will be very, very real, and it will be I think the vaccine passport will be for real too.
Yeah. So my last question to all four of you, or whoever wants to answer, is that do you think we are better prepared as a race now if there's a new infection that comes up, maybe another bat creates an infection or there's a lab leak, are we better prepared, you feel, to take on something now?
So maybe I'll take a shot at it.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you can just make a couple of comments on that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just saying that are we better prepared for it? Yes and no, right? So the yes part is in terms of, it's like how we can, especially from a treatment point of view, understand the whole process and the regulatory part of it. There's enough experience now, so we can be fairly quick in terms of, getting to a treatment, right? Even on vaccines, for example, even if there are variants, you're better prepared for that. I think a lot more lessons need to be learned in terms of preparedness about administration, for example, of a vaccine. Yes. Right? It shows that the inequality that we have seen, the vaccine nationalism, which some countries have displayed, all these things, because it should not be a situation where, India, we are fortunate because we produce world's, almost 60% of the vaccines, global production. Right, so we are able to deal with it in a certain way. But what about other developing countries who don't have anything? Africa as a classic case right now. Lots of parts of Africa which don't have access to vaccine. Whereas in the US, it's a rich country. Europe, it's a rich country. They're able to procure the initial lots. So I think it's these kind of things. It's like, especially a pandemic of this nature calls upon everybody. Right, the governments, it calls upon pharmaceutical manufacturers, vaccine manufacturers, all of us to work together. And also philanthropists, and alliances which have been formed to rise up to the occasion in a very different way from what it has shown at this point of time, in terms of
Correct.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. And I think strategic governance is what we are in the process of learning better. Yes. I think boots on the ground, people are working very well. And we've all agreed and understood how to be disciplined, from the sabziwala to the managing maids at home and travel, etc. So the common people know and will follow protocols, as Rupali said, in hospitals, sharing of treatment protocols, that happens worldwide. Science gets shared very easily. Strategic governance in terms of rolling it out in the country. How do you provide for underserved countries? And that is where these alliances, WHO, Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation, they may have to sort of do their own reflections on how best to move forward. But short answer, yes, we are better prepared. This has taught us many things, tangible and intangible.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to now ask my Vice President, Sumita Roy, to join us on screen, please.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for a very informative discussion. This helps us to dispel our worries regarding the vaccine. And the message is to go ahead and get vaccinated. Thanks, Priya, for a very well-moderated session. Thanks to our members, and a special thanks to Rupali and our online viewers and the media. Now, over to Dia now.
Thank you, Sumitadi, and thank you all once again. I think it's been such an important and relevant conversation. And I think as you've all made it abundantly clear, vaccines are our primary weapon to tackle the coronavirus. Absolutely necessary and our passport to a good health. So we have to all remember, I think, that we are still very vulnerable. And I think prevention is the key. And none of us should be complacent at all. Thank you all once again. Stay safe. Continue to adopt all the precautions that have been said today. Use your face masks, physical distancing, hand hygiene, and avoid crowds. And we will see you soon on our next webinar. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.